All right, I'll let you kick it off.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Webflow Conf. Hope you're having a great time. Good to see you, Mason.
Good to see you, Kendra.
Well, we're going to talk to you today about a project that we're really kind of in love with. We've been working on for almost a year. And we're going to start by talking about emerging technology and creating a 3D clubhouse experience. So we're going to share our hopes and dreams and successes and challenges in creating a story-driven experience called Letter Run. It's a Webflow-based 3D clubhouse that uses a collection of technologies like Blender and Spline and React and ThreeJS. But those things, that list, that's just our tools. It's our means to an end. Today's talk is really about optimism and empowerment and about working to bring more people together to build more things in Webflow. So we're Edgar Allan, and we're a brand to build digital agency. So that means we do brand strategy and UX and digital design and content creation, and that we build in Webflow and beyond. That's our work, but we see our job as something a little bit bigger, to explore the edges of what's possible so we can bring new ideas to our clients. And we do this through seeing brand a little bit differently as more of a club that you build and a foundation that you build. And we do it through Webflow, helping our clients have a better story with their customers, because Webflow allows brands to own their marketing layer and react to their audiences quickly and creatively. And today we're going to talk about the output of that mindset and how Webflow supports makers like us through showing you a project that is really close to our hearts. So this is a play in 4 acts, and it's got a dramatic opener, kind of a challenge to overcome, some action in the middle, and a few lessons learned, and then a resolution that you can actually experience when we're done talking. So we got a little bit for everybody here. The first section, we're going to talk about building with optimism and about why we even took on this project. Secondly, we're going to talk about prototypes and false horizons, how we quickly validated the ideas that we had, at least internally. And in part 3, Mason's going to talk about light, color, and character development. And we are going to share a design deep dive into building the world of Letter Run. And then finally, we're going to close with how Webflow became the hub for us to bring all of this together. And honestly, if there's one takeaway in this entire thing, it's that we're a multi-talented, multifaceted team at Edgar Allan, and that, people with different backgrounds, that's what brings innovation to any project. So let's start, though, with the feel-good stuff, building together with optimism. And this, folks, is Letter Run. The idea is that you're this little EA character, and you run around through this huge 3D world made of the letters of our logo on a scavenger hunt, searching for items that will, if you get all of them, you'll get a real life prize in your mailbox. And so all of this nearly year-long journey started with a new brand for us, and a creative itch and a feeling that we were trying to capture within our team. And honestly, this is us. This is us about a year ago, actually. We used to be based terrestrially in Atlanta, Georgia. And at this point, because of the pandemic, we were a newly permanently remote team, and we were kind of yearning for some kind of connection. So early pandemic, we let go of our physical office, which was this amazing place built with optimism and a nail gun. So we were a group searching for something to pull us together. And we knew that this didn't have to be, and it wasn't going to be a physical space again. But just as we think about brand a little bit differently, not as a permanent structure made of concrete, but as a club that you join around an idea or an emotional connection to the people that you're going to find there, this project filled that gap. And it became an exercise for us in club building, and started with a new brand identity. This is a little glimpse of that. A bright beginning for us as we became that permanently remote team. And out of that came Edgar, this guy, our huggable, character-driven logo. And pretty immediately, because he is just adorable, we thought he needed his own world. So that gave us an opportunity and an opportunity to do some pretty hard work. So ultimately, this is a little bit about us. We like to push our work. When we're stuck or floating around, our inclination is to push on the boundaries around us and kind of see what happens. And so first, we wondered, how could we challenge ourselves through new technologies and design and new narrative opportunities? How can we push the limits of our typical process by playing people's strengths and give them a chance to stretch their creative legs and think around new problems in their own ways? And we know that innovation is what happens at the edges. So we wondered, what can we bring back from that edge to our more traditional projects and to the wider Webflow community? I think as a team, we are happiest when we're breaking stuff. And then reporting back on our own pain and successes. So there's a lot of that in this project. We have a saying at Edgar Allan, everyone in the pool. And this is a literal pool and let her run with pool noodles and floaties and palm trees. But when we say everyone in the pool at EA, we mean everybody get into collaborative mode and freely, pointedly bring your perspectives to the work. So writers critique UX and designers draft copy and UX folks push pixels around. But this wasn't just a regular project. This is world building. It's pretty far out of our typical scope of work. So our first goal became helping everybody from the two different kinds of developers on the right side to the designers and writers over there on the left to get in that pool and work from their strengths in what we call swim lanes of collaboration. So Webflow gives us a great opportunity to do this by allowing us to scale what's possible by giving people clear areas of influence and impact on a final project. So our designers started crafting Edgar's world, and our writers started crafting its why and what, and developers got going in their various tools, and we got somewhere pretty cool pretty quickly, and then we hit a little bit of a wall. So let's talk about quick wins and fast prototypes and false horizons in this second act. So at the very beginning of this, Mason here slacked our design director, Chesley, and said, hey, Ches, what if we make each letter of the Edgar Allan logo into a room representing how and where we work? And that sounded like fun. So we started playing around, and sketches of that world came together pretty fast, and it felt pretty good. It felt like a lot of progress really quickly. On the strategic end of things, at the same time, we started thinking, what's the narrative of this space going to be? At first, it was a virtual copy of our beloved physical space that I showed you earlier. But then we started thinking a little deeper and thought, what if it represented the way we work, how we work, why we work? And then we also added some color, and it looks so fantastic that we started thinking, wouldn't this be awesome if it was 3D? So we got something working in Blender and into React within about a week. And the optimism around this thing grew. So we thought, hey, this could actually work. So we thought, again, wouldn't it be cool if we could bring it into Webflow? And that worked too. We found we could embed the ThreeJS file into Webflow and capture a simple button click. But with a head full of ideas and hearts full of hope, this is where everything got really difficult. And I'm going to pass it over to Mason to talk a little bit about the finer details and the more technical aspects of the project.
Thank you, Kendra. Now let's get into the execution and the fundamentals of how we were thinking about light, color, and character development. The 3D models came quickly because we had some great pencil sketches, and we had a solid foundation and a concept. In the models, we explored wall height, character size, and overall scale, sometimes with half walls to see how things would work with different configurations, and we experimented with multiple angles. But one of the things that was the most difficult was really color, and everything just felt a little off. As a team, this was our first 3D project, and one of the challenges was moving from flat design environments like Figma and into a more dynamic world. We learned that the process of applying color is complicated in 3D by textures and materials and virtual lights and how things reflect off of elements. It's also complicated by the process of just even applying color. Here we're adding color to elements, and then those need to be exported as image maps. And quite frankly, things just started to get dark within the design, and I don't know, we struggled to find a look that felt right. Even though we were in a 3D environment, the world felt flat. And I don't know, we felt out of our comfort zone. And at this point, we almost gave up on the project. So we went back to some of the core feelings that Kendra was just talking about around the brand and focused on this idea of optimism and joy. And that gave us a place to focus. And so we took a step back and we removed all of the color. And we started with just lights, simple lights, the kind that we had in our small home offices. And immediately we could feel warmth and we could see this world come together. So we started to kind of add back color here and play with textures. And at this point, we really felt like we were getting some momentum going, but we knew that we needed to turn up the brightness. So we turned it way, way up. And we moved away from this photorealistic world and into some type of minimalism with just these pops of color. But now we could see these things coming together. It felt fresh and true to our personality. But we still had a character design. Our story needed a hero to live in this little world. If you remember, we started with a prototype pill character, and it did its job to show off the idea of this 3D world and that there was possibility. And we could jump around and move through the board, and it felt like the next step of the process was just really close. But this is where we hit a kind of horizon line that was difficult to get over. Also, I will say getting lights to render correctly in ThreeJS, it's a whole thing. And we talk about this a little later in the process, but we lived in a moon world, or something that felt like a moonscape, for a really long time. Also, for fun, we even used an open source ninja character to sort of sneak around and play with walk cycles. But when we got into the details of the character, we got stuck between this pill thing and what we called the tooth person. The tooth person on the right ended up especially being frightening because it looked like something from Donnie Darko. Yeah, so we went back to the basics and went back to some of the fundamentals of the brand. The EA word mark had this idea of an E inside of an A. Brilliant, I know. But we started to explore that. And as we did, we found that the E turned sideways, created these little eyes, and Edgar came to life. So we leaned into that. And now we had a visual language, and the proportions started to make sense. And we could play with color. We played with lots and lots and lots of color. And the world came even more to life. We also started to explore what might other beings in this world look like. And so as a company, we have lots of pets. And so, we explored what, cats and maybe a few rabbits could look like.
We didn't forget the dogs.
We didn't forget the dogs.
There are
absolutely.
dogs as well, just not on this slide.
Yeah, we later created those, and those are found in the world. But I mean, look at these guys. They've got little tails, and we just fell in love with them.
They're adorable.
Except we had one question. We had a visual language, but now we had to figure out how to build movement that felt believable. When a character moves, they swing their arms, and it helps to provide visual cues. And those cues tell us that the character is walking. Sounds simple, except when it's not. And you don't have arms, and you have these awkward square sides. So we played with lots of walk cycles. Our solution in the end was to exaggerate the movements into more of a bounce that almost felt like a run. And with that little bit of hop, we had just enough believability. The hop created an optimistic sense of emotion for our character to live in this world. And again, with a head full of ideas and hearts full of hope, we started building the world in React, Webflow, and ThreeJS. And this is where things got even more difficult. But we're going to talk about how we were able to bring it together and how really Webflow was key to not only how we built it, but how we built a workflow. So let's get into this more technical discussion. I will warn you, there's some code that was used in this project. And as a story-driven company, we work from the idea that everyone has a superpower. And when everyone works from their superpower, their point of strength, as a group, we make space for amazing things to happen. As Kendra was saying, this is where innovation comes from, when people are really able to work from their strengths. So for a designer, they should design. And for a Webflow developer, they should develop in Webflow. But if you love code, that's okay too. There is space for you to work within Webflow and do some amazing work. Webflow as a platform will scale as we bring more people with different strengths into projects. So let's jump into the architecture. Our first pass was to embed Webflow into React. Exporting Webflow into React felt like a good idea because it worked. There was an assumption in the team that we might just work in a coded environment and that'll scale and it'll help with performance. But as we did that, one of the things that we discovered very quickly was that once we started to export out of Webflow, it became problematic because it inhibited literally our design workflow. And we needed to take lots of iterations from a design perspective, as we were just talking about. And we needed lots of ways to be able to explore how the UI, how the content, all of this stuff would come together. So unfortunately, with a working project, we ripped out a bunch of code and connections and basically started all over again. This time, we made Webflow the hub for the technology, the UI, and the content. Our architecture was now set up to call React from Webflow. We then allowed React to manage the 3D elements and the logic. This allowed us to have a workflow that worked for everyone. As an example, we could have design iterations in Figma and then move those quickly into Webflow. And then React worked inside of Webflow, and we could have a data object that established a simple listener between the environments. Now we had a place for the team to meet virtually. And if we were to break this down a little bit more, Webflow allows us to manage our data model for all the prompts, the nudges, the messaging in the app, basically all the creative elements. In Webflow, we then initialize the React application. We construct a new data object in Webflow and bind our UI elements and then add event listeners. In React, we then manage a set of functions that communicate state back to Webflow. Here's an example. As the character walks around on a scavenger hunt and they find something, we can trigger an event from the application. This event from the application then goes to the Webflow UI, and we're then able to go and show prompts and messaging and all the sorts of content that are associated with that. And then as you close that out, we then save that state back into the React application. In Webflow, we can build all of the UI elements and interactions perfectly. Here we can kern the type, work on layouts, and connect visual elements to the Webflow CMS. And then we can bind those to the rich functionality of an application. In this case, we're using the React application to then manage the ThreeJS. I know, it sounds easy. It's like we're sitting here in a kitchen. It's like a kitchen cooking show where we just like put it into the oven and it's all of a sudden it comes out.
Finished.
Yeah, except it is. These are really clear swim lanes. Wit works easily in Webflow. Pabs really works easily in code. He would say easy-ish. But when we say these swim lanes, we mean that people can work in the tool of their choice. Webflow is a tool. React and JavaScript are tools. And we can make room for those. And as we get into content, we can then use the Webflow CMS to manage text content for notifications and items found around the board. This allows for our writers to jump in and add elements and change messaging on the fly in an environment that they know. Now switching gears, talking from workflow, let's have a quick note on optimization. I'll say optimization is really hard. Getting color to render is a science. As I said, we lived in the moon world for a really long time. Baking the shadows into the environment allowed us to have a super small file size and high frame rate. Here we have an example of the sandbox environment where 3D meets React. Something we didn't realize is that when we baked the shadows in, it made the physics more complicated. Here we are meeting as a team and talking about how we'd work through some of the collisions in the pool. It was interesting that we discovered Spline and how we could work within that environment as sort of a bridge between Blender and React and the rest of the team. Here we're kind of pulling it into Spline and then we're testing for color and performance. A note on Spline is that the technology is changing really quickly. And if we were to start over today, which we've thought about, we would probably use some of the native physics from Spline. And I can't wait to see what they're going to do with that tool. But that's for another day. And again, with a head full of ideas and hearts full of hope, this is where we launched. And I'm so excited. I'm thrilled to have the chance today to share our journey with you. And I look forward to how we can continue the conversation and learn more together. And you can play for yourself. You can go to letter-run.webflow.io. And I know that there's a lot that we still want to cover. I think for today, we wanted to give a broad overview of how teams can work together, some of the lessons that we learned in working within this app. And so we've got both the clonable that's in Webflow as well as all of the associated code available to download. So you can find those actually in the About section of the game. And that links over to the Made in Webflow showcase as well as to GitHub. So Kendra, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Mason. I'm going to wrap us up and talk a little bit about what we've learned. We've learned a ton. And we've learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. So one thing is we know that innovation is about embracing strengths. We can do more together when everybody's able to get in that pool and work from their strengths it stretches the limits of what's possible, and tools like Webflow help this happen. So secondly, prototypes are fantastic, but they can also be a little bit painful. So prototypes are great, but get ready for my favorite fancy term for Mirage, a Fata Morgana, which is basically an object that isn't entirely real and appears closer than it actually is. So we encountered the ghostly image of the finish line over and over again on this project, and prototypes helped us get there, but they also created a false sense of finish that we had to overcome. Next, if you find yourself lost in the details, remember to go back to that original feeling. So we talk a lot about that in brand and in building that club of brand. It all comes down to, how do you want your audience to feel? And in this case, how do we want our team to feel? How do we want the people playing the game to feel? Things can get complicated and really noisy in the process. You can get lost in the weeds really easily, but come back to the feeling. That is your North Star always. And finally, Webflow helped us create a workflow that brought everything together. It became the glue to knit the whole project together. It allowed our content and technology and design teams to work together, but from their own strengths in the project.
So what's next? We're going to be applying these lessons to all sorts of client work. We're going to be sharing everything that we've learned in Made with Webflow in the showcase and on GitHub. And we're also going to be formalizing this connection between Webflow and React and sharing what we're learning out there with the community. So again, thank you for joining us. You can find us on Twitter at Edgar Allan Co. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So,
Yeah,
and thank you, Kendra.
Yeah, thank you, Mason.
Yeah. Bye.